About the significance of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, and said that the first book, really, Genesis, is that's really a stage, an intro book. The Exodus book is really now the big action book of the Old Testament. For the Jews, really the first 5 books you could call the Bible, what we call the Pentateuch. Penta meaning 5, just the 5 books of Genesis through Deuteronomy. For them is the substance of the whole Bible. Everything else is commentary on these 5 books. And book 2, the book of the Exodus, the one that we're studying, really is the foundational book. This is the action that makes the faith, that is the faith of Jesus Christ, that is the faith of all those who came to believe in Him. The faith that He's fulfilling and culminating is the faith of what happened in and through the events of the Exodus. One of the most important things to say about Jesus for those first Christians was that Jesus is that great prophet that Moses, the prophet of prophets, predicted would come after him. So we began last week just reading that first chapter of Exodus and the first few verses, and we ran up to the birth stories of Moses. We talked about the derivation of Moses' name. And as happens throughout the Old Testament, we see this kind of punning. The Hebrew Bible loves puns. Hebrew is a language of a limited vocabulary, which means that many words do double duty or triple or quadruple. Or many words in Hebrew mean, you use one word can mean 3 or 4 or 5 different things. And one of the things that happens then, you have these puns that the storytellers of the Old Testament very regularly and love to put these things in, and we'll see a couple of those today. So we're going to begin in the middle now of chapter 2 and with the stories of Moses just after he's grown up. You remember we saw the cruel edict of the Pharaoh, that really a genocidal edict. The Pharaoh trying to wipe out now the Israelites. He's oppressed them with their slavery and their hard service in this first chapter, but the writer tells us takes great glee in telling us, and the more he oppressed them, the more they multiplied, the more they grew. And sort of, in a way, that's kind of God's little joke and the hidden working of God in the oppression of the Pharaoh. So we saw now this edict, as I said, a genocide. The whole point is, if he wipes out generations of the baby boys, you see, well then the women in effect become the property of the Egyptian households. They get married, they assimilate in, and sort of generation by generation, just sort of the memory of who the Hebrews are is wiped out. And so one of the things that we see happening throughout the life of Moses is God now, as He reveals Himself to Moses, reestablishing and saying, this memory, this knowledge that began when I called Abraham. Now think about that, 400 years. You and I don't have any cultural memory of things 400 years old. Or if we do, it's the tiniest bit. So that's what they're clinging on to, and that's one of the things that God is revivifying and bringing back to life, is in effect saying, I have been working with you Hebrew people, over this past 400 years, even though sort of your understanding of me and your memory of me, one of the things that we'll see here is that memory has receded so greatly in the past that now God makes a special point when He reveals Himself. He's not just giving a magical name to Moses, he's bringing back up this whole history and saying, in effect, to all the people through Moses, have you forgotten this? I am the most important thing God will say to Moses is, not only I am Yahweh, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And that's a whole history of me working with these people that I've called. And it's a whole future that I have been planning and that I've purposed from the very beginning of calling Abraham. In effect, God's saying, I haven't forgotten, and I'm still on my plan. And now I'm choosing you once and saying, now's the time we're going to make that plan happen. So when the Pharaoh tries to wipe out the boys, we saw the story of Moses, a story kind of in a small way reenacting or alluding to the story of Noah. His mother makes a little ark for him. She covers it with a waterproof material. She puts the baby in it. The boys are supposed to be thrown into the river to kill them. She sets the little ark in the river and watches it go down. Kind of a beautiful picture of faith, you see, of trusting. Now, what's going to happen to my baby boy? She sets the boy afloat upon the river. You see, and now he's in other hands. He's in, though she doesn't know it yet, in God's hands. The sister, his older sister, we learn her name Miriam later. The sister follows down, and it comes among the reeds. Again, we saw this kind of foreshadowing of Moses will lead the people across the sea of reeds. And so when the ark comes to rest in the reeds, we see a little foreshadowing of the whole destiny and career of Moses. So, but then this beautiful picture of the Pharaoh tries to impose this edict on a whole culture and all the people. Who can resist the Pharaoh? Well, everyone who is willing to obey a higher power, a higher God. We see the two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, beauty and blossom, these wonderfully onomatopoetic Hebrew names. And the Hebrew midwives just simply, they allow the Hebrew boys to live, and they explain it to the Pharaoh saying, well, these Hebrew women, you know, they're just so vigorous and strong. You've been making them work so hard, you see, every day. Boy, if they get ready to have a baby, then out comes a baby, you know, and they're back to it. We don't even get time to show up and help them with it. So anyway, now the baby's here. And but the other person, as I said last week, the kind of the unnamed co-conspirator is the daughter of the Pharaoh. As I said, we don't really know who the pharaohs are. There are many well-informed guesses from secular Egyptian history, and there are good guesses. The guesses, though, span a range of about 200 years in Egyptian history, from about 1450 BC to about 1250 BC. And so there's kind of evidence on the sides of several sets of pharaohs, but we don't know exactly the right one. So we don't know the name of this pharaoh's daughter either. But many of the pharaohs had sets of children, and oftentimes those children, as you'd expect, children of the king, they had very lavish, well taken care of lives. And so one of the questions that came up last week was, well, you know, how did the Pharaoh not know that his daughter was raising this Hebrew baby? She may well have had her own house, very well taken care of. She had, as we know, her own retinue of assistants. We do see them, or attendants, with her down at the river. So she may well have had a very independent life, technically under the charge of her father. So we do see the daughter having the child brought out of the water, and we see this punning Hebrew name. I'll call him Moshe because I'm Masha. Moses, the name turns into, because Moshe, though, means drew, or water drawer, the one who draws water or drawn through water. And of course, she says, because I drew him out of the water. And just my own little addition, I think it's a beautiful little Englishification of this story to say she said, I drew him out of the water. That's it. I'm calling him Drew. So, and Moses is a kind of an equivalent. Moshe, though, also is, in Egyptian language, also an Egyptian word. And we said a couple of names like Moses, in his name. Thutmose was the name of a range of a dynasty of pharaohs. Thutmose, 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 so with Moses at the end of his name. And there, in the Egyptian language, Mose just means one who's born. So in other words, we would say son, like John's son, Johnson. But so Thutmose would just mean son of Tut. And so in this case, from her perspective, she might well have been naming him son. Like we say, you know, I've known, this is a great thing about life in the South, I've known several families that where one of the sisters was named Sister. And everybody called her, I mean, that wasn't her name, but that's what everybody called her, and nobody in the family knew who you were talking about. If you said, Mary Lou or what, they'd, oh, sister. Oh, yeah, I know sister, And, of course, the same with Bubba. Bubba is, brother. And, of course, that's the kind of stereotypical Southern name. So anyway, and like this, Moses might well have been called Sonny. So we'll see that, too. God calls him from the bush and says, Sonny, Sonny. To me that lends a different kind of familiarity to God reaching out to this fellow and saying, you're mine now, No, you need to know me. So, okay, now back to reading. So we left off the story of the naming it Moses at chapter 2, verse 11. So let's begin right there. Chapter 2, verse 11. One day, you see where we are, after Moses had grown up. So now, remember, the mother, when Moses was taken out, his big sister, right on the spot, came up to the Pharaoh's daughter and said, do you want me to get one of the Hebrew women to nurse this baby for you? And the daughter, obviously knowing what she was doing, knowing that she's flouting her father's regulation in the name of kind of simple humanity, says, yes, do that. Of course, the sister turns right around, gets her mother and Moses' mother, and comes and has the child. She nurtures the child and nurses him until she weans him, probably anywhere from 2 to 5 years old. But so, kind of we would think school age, from kindergarten age on, then she brings him back and he's raised in the Pharaoh's household. Now this is one of the things we'll see throughout the story, a kind of play and meditation on the very mixed and even ambiguous identity of Moses. Moses is a Hebrew who now, from his earliest memories, is raised as an Egyptian. So he has kind of all of Egyptian culture in him. He has Egyptian language, Egyptian ways. And so he comes out at the end of this process very much an Egyptian. But he knows that he is a Hebrew. And so he's raised with this kind of double identity. And this puts him in a kind of ambiguous relation. When he goes to try to help the Hebrews look at him and go, why are you trying to help me, you stupid Egyptian? They don't really accept his help. This will be an ongoing thing throughout all of Moses' life, no matter how he becomes cemented in as the mediator of God with the Hebrew people. There will always be this ambivalency to the relationship of Moses to the people. They never really accept him. Of course, they have to accept him because he's God's agent. But in another way, they're always, and we'll see this very tense relationship between Moses and them kind of founded on this. And so for Moses himself, then if you turn it around from himself, then he's always kind of in the place of saying, who am I? And that becomes his first question in his encounter with God. God, you want me to do this work? Wait a second, how do I even have any kind of standing to do the things that you choose me to do? So here's a story about that identity of Moses, right at the moment now where he becomes, where he's becoming, so to speak, the adult Moses. One day after Moses had grown up, so now the tradition says that he's even 40 years old at this. Of course, in these early books of the Bible, our years numbering system don't quite fit with theirs. Moses will spend another 40 years in the wilderness, so by the time he comes back to free the people, he's 80 years old. Again, as I said, that doesn't really jibe with what we would think of as the Wendell accepted. Most 80-year-olds are not going to be, I don't know, when you hit 80, you're not going to probably be saying, all right, now I'm ready to start my life's work. So, I know I'm on the brink of 60, and I know by the time I hit 80, I'm not going to be, I'm sort of, you start thinking of holding movements, much more than, now it's time to go forward, So anyway, in the biblical numbering system, he's 40, but still we ought to think of him as a young man here, because that's what he is in terms of his life's work. But so here's one day after Moses had grown up, let's read an entire sentence before we stop. He went out to his people, literally to his brothers, so we're talking about the Hebrews, and he saw their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian. Now, of course, he looks like an Egyptian. He he's lived as an Egyptian, but now we're talking about how he starts to empathize with his Hebrew people. He saw an Egyptian beating. This word nakah means to strike, and it has a murderous intent to it always. So, and we might even translate this beating almost to death, or trying to beat to death. Or he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsfolk. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed, nakah, he struck, he beat to death the Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, he saw two Hebrews fighting, and he said to the one who was in the wrong, "Why do you strike, nakah? Why are you trying to beat to death your fellow Hebrew?" He answered, "Who made you a ruler," literally a prince, "and a judge over us?" Of course, he looks like a prince. He looks Egyptian. "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us?" But now notice this. "Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid, and he thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard it, he sought to kill Moses. And so there's all kinds of ambivalency in this story. Moses goes out. He's an Egyptian walking out here kind of at the beginning, but he sees his people and he knows, no, these are really my people. And he sees the Egyptian beating the Hebrew, and immediately the strong feelings of, what are you doing? I can't let that happen. And in a way, he's feeling the whole burden of the Hebrew oppression, the Hebrew slavery here, but also notice the ambivalence in this little thing. He looked this way and that. You see, meaning he knows I ought to do something, but he also thinks, is anybody watching me? Because from one way or another, I could get in trouble for whatever I'm about to do next. But then, boom, he strikes the guy, even kills him. And then again, ambivalency. Any of the pharaohs, who are the Hebrews? They're the disposable people. If Moses were really an Egyptian prince, what would he think about striking anyone, even an Egyptian worker? If he were the son of the king, he would think, nah, that's what happened, sorry about that. And he would just prance on, wouldn't he? He wouldn't bother to say, oh my gosh, I got to hide this, I got to cover this up. So it shows again that he's very much aware, I'm Egyptian looking, I don't have the Egyptian status. If the Pharaoh knew I did this, if he knew one of his own sons did something like this, he would say, what are you going to do? That's the price of being the king. You see, well, we lost one. Okay, get the next one in there. Whether it were Egyptian or Hebrew. But when Moses does it, when the Pharaoh hears of it, he kind of says, that's it, that's the lost straw, as if he's been tolerating the presence of this Hebrew who's been raised in his daughter's household. So all of these conflicting things here, and we see this, but what we're seeing mostly is the character development of Moses. Notice again, as a kind of looking forward, a proleptic view in this story, what's Moses trying to do? He sees the suffering of the Hebrews, he's affected by them, and he thinks this isn't right, that at least this one ought to be rescued from this. He tries to rescue him, and what's the response? Again, what does the Hebrew do? The Hebrew says, get out of here. I don't need you to rescue me. And, oh, you're going to kill me the same way that you killed that guy yesterday? So his first story of Moses kind of going out in the flush of, I've been trained to be a leader, is utter failure, abject failure. Everything he's done has gone wrong, both in terms of the Hebrews accepting his help and letting him just give them a little bit of help, at least this person being grateful to him, either one of these guys, and in terms of the Pharaoh saying, listen, I'm the big one and you're not, and now I can wipe you out, and that's what I've determined to do. So the Pharaoh says, all right, I'm going to kill you. Notice Moses' leadership. Moses tries to go out and in effect, fight fire with fire. Oh, the Pharaoh is going to have these murderous intentions to my people. I'll murder an Egyptian. That's what I'll do. Again, utter and abject failure. One of the older Jewish authors looks upon this. This is Moses' crime. Moses is, of course, ever after this, a murderer. And, when we talk about God choosing failed people and making leaders out of them, Moses is, in a way, is kind of number one in the roster. Because this murder follows him around. The older Jewish authors, they love to make up these little legendary stories about Moses, and one of them has a picture of Moses at the end of Deuteronomy. Moses is not allowed to go into the promised land. Well, he makes this little vignette and says, when Moses was talking with God at the end of his life, this is what God said to him. I would let you go in there, but remember, you killed that guy. You murdered that Egyptian. I can't let you have the promise. The prize of going into the promised land. After that, the very ambiguity in these words. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one there, he went and killed the man. John Wesley interpreted this in a very much more positive light. He said Moses is trying to figure out his leadership here. He says when Moses looks around, what he's looking for is to see, isn't anybody going to help this guy? This guy's getting beaten by this Egyptian. He's about to kill him. Won't anybody help them? Wesley says, no, that's a good motive that he has. And when he looks around and says, is there a man here? Isn't there any man here? Wesley was preaching on this incident. He says, here's one good rule of action. If you can't find any man present, try to be one. I thought that was a nice little thing. It ends up, it didn't quite fit the story, John, but he was preaching from horseback, so he could just go on. And anyway, who made you a prince or a judge against it? Moses, an utter failure. All right, 1:15. But Moses, so the Pharaoh said, Pharaoh decided he needed to kill Moses, and so now Moses has to flee. Moses fled from Pharaoh, verse 15. He settled in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters. This is a kind of biblical number for a full pass-all. You've got all you could have. If you have 7 of something, that's, you've got all anybody could want. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water, and they filled the troughs to water their father's flock. But some shepherds came and drove them away. So they've done the work, they've drawn the water, but now these men run them off. Moses got up and came to their defense, literally rescued them, and watered their flock. When they returned to their father, Reuel means friend of God, Reuel, he said, how is it that you've come back so soon today? Why aren't y'all still, it usually takes you longer. How'd you come back so soon today? They said, an Egyptian helped us. Remember how he looks? An Egyptian helped us against the shepherds. He even drew water for us. So he even Moshe'd the water for us. So here's one little kind of sweet little pun on Moses' name. He Moshe'd the water for us and watered our flock. The man said to his daughters, well, where is he? Why did you leave the man bread? Moses agreed to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter, Zipporah, in marriage. She bore a son, and Moses, named him Gershom, for he said, I have been an alien residing in a foreign land. What a melancholy little thing from Moses. But again, what's he had to do? Well, his home has been, he's a Hebrew among the Egyptians, but now he's had to utterly flee away. He flees to Midian. Midian is a region, but it's kind of an indefinite. There's not an actual nation that has come down named Midian. But Midian sort of means out of the way far away. The Midianites do appear back in the book of Genesis, and in fact, they are distant relatives to the, just a little Bible sword drill. Flip back to Genesis chapter 25. So Genesis 25, we're still in the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but we haven't even gotten past the stories of Abraham and Isaac yet. The middle of the story about Isaac, Genesis 25. This is the story of Isaac. He met his wife Rebekah. Do you remember how he met her? the servant was sent out far away to get to his among his family relatives and found Rebekah. Do you remember where she was?
Well.
At a well. And she asked him, he basically presented the marriage proposal to her and said, my master's looking for a husband. Yeah, so the story of Rebekah and Isaac. So here's a well story and a marriage that comes out of it. That's not any what I want you to look at. I just want you to know that's where we are. But so now right after that story, look at Genesis 25. So now Sarah died, and this is just a little conclusion. And after that, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimram, Yoksham, Medan. You have to learn this in seminary, how to pronounce these words. But now what's the next one? Midian. Midian was one of the sons of Abraham through, of course, you know, the biblical story went the other direction, but he also had these sons. So in effect, these were stepsons, so children, and in relation to the biblical tribes, the team that made the biblical cut. But anyway, there's Midian. So by Keturah, another wife of Abraham. So all I want you to see is the Midianites are distant relatives from Abraham. Now, of course, that's 400 years ago. So they're very distant relatives. But I just want you to see there's some reason for that the Midianites would, particularly if they learned that Moses is a Hebrew, of thinking, oh, okay, well, we're kind of related, you see. The Egyptians are very proud of, we're not Semitic, we're not like any of those Hebrews and any of those other people, but so the Hebrews are kind of, you know, they're a mongrel kind of people as nomads, and so anyway, this is sort of where part of their flock ended up. It's not part of our main story, but anyway, they enter the story here. So he's out in the land of Midian, and of course he takes a Midianite wife. Also, well, while you're there in Genesis, go on. Where do we stop at? 25. Go on to Genesis 37. So now we've had Abraham, Isaac's son Jacob, and Esau. Jacob is the one who had the 12 sons, of course. And the last of his sons was Joseph, who was the little snotty brat that the rest of the sons could not stand. But Jacob loved him. Jacob said, he is my absolute favorite. Remember, he gave him the coat of many colors. And Joseph had dreams. And in Joseph's dreams, he said, we were out playing basketball in my dream, and you guys fed me passes all day long. I scored 100 points last night. You guys were just standing there clapping for me and bowing down and saying, that Joseph, he's the greatest player in the world. And the other boys all stood around and said, that little poot, I hate that guy. And so what did they do? They threw him in a pit, and they were going to kill him. But then they said, Judah, the older brother, said, come on, boys, we can't kill our brother. And so what did they do? Well, they found some passing traders, not traitors, but traders. And so they said, you guys want to buy a servant, a slave? And they sold him a servant. And the servant was Joseph. They pulled him out of the pit and said, he ain't worth much, but here, you can have him. And who were those traders? Look at 37. I should look at my verses. Verse 25. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels. They were on their way down to Egypt. Keep going. And they said, what profit is we going to? Let's sell him to this group. And verse 28. When some other traders, they were Midianite traders, passed by, they sold him to them. So the Midianites have a history with the family. That's what I want you to see. It's just the Midianites appear in different places. The Midianites appear later on in Judges chapter 6. There's a story about Gideon, and Gideon has some trouble with the Midianites. So they're not just ooey-gooey over each other. But anyway, that's a long-distant kind of family relation. So now, So, and their geography isn't clear, but what it basically means is far away, days and days travel away from Egypt. So Moses is, and that's why he feels so stuck out here. It's why he names his son Ger, foreigner, alien. I'm the alien, he says. I'm the one who's stuck out here. But also notice the story itself. Now just think about this story. The first story, Moses trying to be a deliverer, he kills this man. He says killing is the order of the day. It works out no good for him, and in fact puts him under the curse of condemnation for murder. Oh boy, he hasn't learned a thing about how to really be a deliverer. But now in this story, out here, with these women, with these shepherds, he does exactly the right thing. He does just exactly what's necessary, doesn't kill anybody, but he rescues the women from these bullying shepherds. And because of that, it all turns up roses for him. It all works out for him. And more than that, he gains a wife out of it. And he joins now, sort of, in a way, he very strongly joins the Hebrew family. This is the way the Hebrews get their wives. These stories around the well. And of course, think about Jesus himself. His greatest conversion story, in a way, is the story of Jesus in Samaria, coming and meeting a woman at the well. Of course, he doesn't marry her, but he does, in effect, he becomes her Messiah. She converts her whole town to him. So these stories of the kind of a blessed union that begins at a well and around the topic of water. So that previous story was from death, and here's a story about life, and of course the ultimate thing about life is stories. Some ancient writer said, all good comedies end in marriage, end with a wedding. If you have a story of families working out and everything going, and there's all the ups and downs and everybody, oh no, and miscommunication and stuff. But then the perfect happy ending to any good comedy, he says, because it's kind of the perfect little picture, paradigm of a great life is, well, it should end at a marriage. You see, it ends with the party anyway, so he draws water for them. He Moses' for them. And then, like Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob also met Rachel at a well, and they got married. So he delivers the 7 daughters of Reuel. And then just this kind of naming of his child. He has another child. He names him Eliezer. God is my help. But anyway, for now we only see this son, Gershom. But Moses has gone from being sort of the privileged, sort of half son of Egyptian royalty to he's identified as Egyptian. This guy helped us. He was Egyptian. Well, of course, he just run out here. Of course, he's still dressed in his garb from his old life. But now this comment about being a foreigner, and I'm in a foreign land here, says, I don't really belong anywhere anymore. I don't belong out even where I am, even when I marry into the family. This isn't really my home, and I'm lost from my home back. My home isn't even my home. So just, in a way, a beautiful little scene. All right, let's go on. Verse 23. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. And as I said, in the biblical chronology, for instance, when the New Testament writer, Stephen, when he tells the story of Moses, this is another 40 years that Moses is in the wilderness. Of course, when Jesus goes into the desert for 40 days, there's a numerical allusion being made here to Moses. His time of kind of preparation out in the desert in this faraway place was 40 years. So after a long time, yes, it's been a long time, the king of Egypt died. And that means really, the book started off with Joseph died, his brothers died, all that generation. Well, now we have the same kind of feeling about the king of Egypt. Well, not only has he died, but so with a new king, his whole administration will turn over. So really, all the people who knew Moses, all the people who had an animus against Moses, in other words, the threat against Moses has gone away. So that obstacle to his returning is not there anymore. Now all he really needs is, though, does he have a reason to ever return to the Hebrews? And so far he doesn't. Well, I have a life, a home, a family, children out here. I'm working. But he's working in the lowly craft, kind of one of the preparation works of the of the Bible, he's being a shepherd. The Israelites groaned under their slavery, but first there's this preparation, the end of chapter 2, these 3 verses here. After a long time the king of Egypt died, and just listen to these words, the Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Who are they crying to? There's no object to the word. It's true in Hebrew too, yeah. And lots of commentators like to make the point of, here's the expression of despair. If you could say, God, come help us, you see, then at least your complaint would have a target to it. But if you cry out, and there's no one that the cry is going to, well, there's a kind of perfect literary expression of the ultimate in despair. I don't even have anyone to say, help! You know, because what I knew was I was just screaming in the dark. I'm just crying, groaning in the dark. So these 2 verbs just express the Hebrews are now utterly at their end, and they've forgotten whoever it was that helped them in the past. They don't even have the name of God. And so, of course, that's crucial because that's what the whole next chapter is about, when God will choose. And so that's the very next thing. Notice. And now God, who's been in the background, who's been just allowing His purposes to be fulfilled silently, so to speak. He hasn't been absent, but notice the 2 verbs of the despair of the Israelites are now met with suddenly God bursts into action. 4 strong verbs of God. And so out of their slavery, their cry for help rose up to God. Now this is the generic word. In fact, it's the word Elohim, which means the God. So we haven't got specific with God yet. Their cry rose up to God, to the God. God heard their groaning. So there's one. God heard. God remembered His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You see, there's the whole history of His promises. God remembered. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. Does anybody have a different translation than God took notice of them?
God knew their condition.
Yeah, God was concerned for them. God knew. Yeah, that's the word that's translated in the New RSV. God took notice. It's the know word, and it means God really got it. God, took concern. I think is active concern is the whole point. I don't know about you, if I'd say, boy, something bad's going on outside. Yeah, I know. I took notice of it. You know, what does that mean? It means the opposite, doesn't it? I'm ready to act. So anyway, I don't think that's the perfect translation, but God was concerned about it. It means God was now, the moment was here. God was ready to step into active participation. All right. So now chapter 3. So here's Moses now. He's in kind of despair. He doesn't know who he is anymore. And in his eyes, he's fallen down to the kind of the lowest rung of the prominence ladder. Chapter 3, Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. Is this the same guy? What was his father-in-law's name? Reuel. Yeah, Reuel. Well, it is the same guy. So anyway, what? Okay, well, he's got 2 names here. So biblical scholars would say, it represents 2 different traditions kind of being stitched together. Of course, these stories were all told for many years before they were written down. You and I think of a story, well, if you put a story out, you're putting it out in written form. No. People told stories, and they told them around the fire, but they did take great concern to get them right. If somebody told the story wrong, you'd say, no, that's not how it went. No, it goes like this, and you'd sort of stay with that person until they got it right. They told the stories the same ways, but so it may be 2 traditions. It may just be one commentator I read, Peter Enns, a really good commentary on Exodus, says that he thinks, no, this is just like, we know lots of people that have 2 different names. Do you know who George Ruth is?
Okay.
Well, yeah, if you say, you mean Babe Ruth. Yeah. Oh, I know Babe Ruth. Yeah, he was great. Well, who's George Ruth? Well, the same guy. Yeah. So anyway, he just says, yeah, it was like that. So anyway, he's and actually there's one other name that's associated with Reuel, Jethro, a little later. I love this name, is also, and you can argue whether this is the same guy. It's supposed to be the same guy. Also the name Hobab, H-O-B-A-B. Okay, we're not going to go there. But anyway, I just wanted to confuse you a little bit. So anyway, same guy, but he's got a different name. And really the point is Moses. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, which means both Jethro's taken him into the family. It means also, sort of in the pecking order, being the shepherd is a low on the rung. So it's good work, though, The priest for Jethro, but notice Jethro is the priest of Midian. He's a priest out there. And here's a fascinating thought. They're related to Abraham. Do the Midianites know who Yahweh is? Do they know the God of Abraham? Do they know the God of the Hebrews? And there are lots of we'll see a couple of them, clues in here to say, oh yeah, they knew him. And what Moses is learning, in other words, is not something absolutely true. God saying, I never told anybody this before, but, my name is Yahweh. But rather, he's telling it to Moses. Moses, you need to know this. You don't even know who you are. But lots of interesting things. And have you seen the movie Prince of Egypt? Interesting things that they do in the movie. They make a big part of this, of Moses in his time out in Midian. It's a wonderful, my wife Angie, 21 years as a special ed teacher, she just will not watch any kind of cartoon movie. She just says, I'm done. I graduated from that. So anyway, I can't go to the movies if they're in animated form. But anyway, so I checked it out and I did watch it. It's a really good movie. It's beautifully done. But one of the things that they have to imagine is what was the life that was going on out here. And they imagine Jethro the priest and sort of what were his services like in the wilderness. We'll see his daughter, Zipporah, at the end of this set of stories. She obviously has learned very explicit and interesting priestly rituals in her time. She does this ritual that ends up saving Moses' life when they set out on their journey. But so anyway, just an interesting question. He's a priest of Midian, and what does that mean about the Midianites' knowledge of Yahweh and of them? Just an interesting question. And I think they must know something about the God of Abraham. The priest of Midian, he led his flock, Moses, beyond the wilderness. This is a funny word and people don't know how to translate it. Beyond the wilderness, achar meaning literally behind the wilderness. Moses is already out in a kind of a nowhere location, so he's down in Barnwell or someplace like that, or whatever's in your mind that you think nobody ever goes there. When we go to Iquitos, Peru, and you fly there from Lima, I've talked to people in the Lima airport who are Peruvians, and they say, "Oh, we're glad you're in Peru. Where are you going?" And you say, "We're going to Iquitos," and they go, "Really? I've never been there. Why would anybody go out there?" Because it's the jungle of the jungle. And so anyway, that's where Moses is. He's in the desert of the desert. But now the storyteller says he went behind or beyond the desert even. So and the point, of course, is the extremity. He's farther than he's ever been before. He's going to meet God. So that's really the point. One day he went farther than he'd ever gone before. He went beyond the wilderness or even behind it, and he came to Horeb. Now Horeb, the mountain of God. Horeb also has double names. Well, later on, of course, this is the same mountain Moses will bring the delivered people to, and then they'll call it Mount Sinai. Horeb and Sinai are the same thing. Biblical writers try to make some kind of distinction. The most likely one or common one is to say, well, Sinai was the name of the actual mountain. Horeb is the name of the region where it's planted. So you could call it Mount Horeb. But even more important, and with this theme of beyond or behind the desert, the wilderness, is that Horeb itself, the name means parched, desiccated, dry. So he's coming to Horeb, parched mountain, or dry mountain, and that's where he's meeting God. And it's interesting. One ancient Jewish commentator says, a man named Rashi says, notice that Moses, whose whole life has been circled around water. He was thrown in the water, he floated down the water, he was drawn from the water, he was named from the water, he's heading to the water. So the moment of his kind of extremity, when he will meet God, and of course this happens with all of us really, this moment of his extremity is, notice he's in the driest of the dry, in this beyondest of beyond places. Parched mountain. He went to Horeb, the mountain of God. In the ancient Near East, gods always dwell on mountains, and so the Hebrews are sort of are using that and kind of going with it. Moses, on to Horeb, the mountain of God. He looked, and the bush was verse 2. There, the angel of the Lord. Now just notice that the word Lord, notice it's all caps. I've talked about this a lot, but it's incredibly important for reading the Old Testament because it's a conventional way that our English authors try to respect the Hebrew way of treating the words, this word, the name of God. L-O-R-D. Notice it's in all capitals. That's because it's not the word Lord. It is the name of God, written by the consonants Y-H-W-H. Yahweh. And there the angel, or you could also translate it, the messenger of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, the bush was blazing, yet it wasn't consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight. See why that bush is not burned up. Now the messenger of Yahweh, this is a kind of a name to say the God is present. But notice, if you make a character, then the character is a stand-in for God. But it's the real God. The messenger of Yahweh appears all throughout the Old Testament. But in a way, it's a kind of way to say God is really here. This messenger is identical with God, with Yahweh, and yet is acting in the name of Yahweh, is doing the very thing that Yahweh wants done, that the real God wants done. But in some way, they're also kind of protecting the person from encountering God, so to speak, face to face. And that's definitely true with Moses. Many contemporary authors then see this as, think about this, the figure who is equal with God, but who comes down to appear among human beings to do and is united with God and does exactly what God will. What do you call that figure appearing in earth? Well, we call him Jesus Christ. So many Christian authors like to read this and see here's a little kind of pre-show of the incarnate Christ, a little picture in the Old Testament. God appears in the bush. Near Eastern gods appear in trees. The bush is a little kind of humble for them, but see, again, that might be saying, well, God's saying, well, my people are in this humble position, so I'm coming to a bush instead of this. Furthermore, Moses is in a humble position. You know, he's working as a shepherd. He doesn't want to do that, but that's what he's doing for now. Now, we're going to have to end with this, but that's okay because more ink has been spilled on this than anything else in the world. So we'll just start right here next week. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Sonny, Sonny, Moses. Notice he says it twice, like when God calls Abraham with Isaac. And he said, here I am. Then he said, come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet. The place you're standing is holy ground. So that brings Moses up short. He said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then Yahweh said to him, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I've heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings. I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Well, it's about time for us to stop. I do want you just to see this. The very next thing God is going to do is give Moses his name. So I just want to write this down for you, because just so you can see it and think about it for a moment. What God will say to Moses is, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. And the best translation of this is either I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. You have this in your Bible. It's at 3:15, and it's down in your little footnotes. What I want you to see is that then he says, I am, Ehyeh, but it's, tell them that Ehyeh, usually translated Yahweh. What I want you to see is the Hebrews right to left. So here is Y in the Hebrew form. The H, this little thing with the top is an H. Here is the W, this little thing looking like a parenthesis, and then another H. YH. So in English, we would write them like this. This is the personal name that God gives. In Hebrew, all words are spelled by their consonants. The vowels you just simply put in by learning the word. So they're not written into the... And if you see Hebrew signs, they don't have the vowels written into them. But the Hebrews, after the exile in 538, when the Hebrews came back, they said, listen, God allowed us to be smashed because we did not revere His name. We are never going to say His name again. Well, we're reading aloud from the Scriptures. How do we keep from saying God's name and taking it on our lips and besmirching it? Here's what we'll do. We're going to take the Hebrew word Adonai, which means Lord. And every time we look in the Bible and we see the word Yahweh, the name Yahweh, Y-H-W-H, we will say aloud Adonai. And if you go to the synagogue today or Friday night, you'll hear them do this. When they read the name Yahweh, they read Adonai. And in order to stop, to not make sure they don't say it, they said, we'll take the vowels of Adonai and we'll add them in here. Ah. Although, it's just how Hebrew works. This one gets changed to an E, a soft E, So, ah. When the English translators of the King James Bible and the American Standard Version Bible tried to render Yahweh into English, they took Adonai's vowels that they were reading, that they'd heard that they knew the Jews did. They took them and stuck them into the YH, VH. Now these are, J and Y phonetically are the same. And V and W phonetically are the same. If you think about German, if you think about Wittenberg, it's spelled Wittenberg, it's said Wittenberg. So V and W phonetically are the same thing. So anyway, and they said, but now, they stuck those in and said, so how in English would you say the name of God? You'd say it Yehovah. And that's where Jehovah came from. It's an absolute English mistake founded on a desire to honor the Jewish reticence to speak the name Yahweh. So I wanted you to see that. Next week we'll begin right here with Moses talking to God, and Moses will be given this name, I am, Yahweh, or Ehyeh, Yahweh will be the name that God will give to him. But I want you to see this yourself. When you read the Psalms, if you read the Psalms for your devotions, you'll see two things. You'll see either Lord, all caps, and other places like, look in Psalm 8, and you'll see, O Lord, my Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. The first, O Lord, is the word Yahweh. And you'll see it spelled all caps. O-L-O-R-D, all caps. O Lord, my Lord, our Lord, our Lord. The second Lord is the word Adonai, and you'll see it spelled with with small capital L, little o, little r, little d. Anytime in the Old Testament that you read and you see all caps, this is the personal name of God, Yahweh, in the Hebrew text. Anytime you see capital L, little o-r-d, this is the Hebrew word Adonai for Lord. And to me, it makes a tremendous difference to read the Psalms and realize that David is saying, not just the Lord is my shepherd. In other words, that thing up there in the sky somewhere, the big helpy guy. No, David doesn't say that. Look at Psalm 23. David says, Yahweh is my shepherd. You see, Yahweh, who called Moses, who was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who was determined to make a people that will live with Him forever. That's my shepherd, the one who is with me forever and ever. Yahweh is my shepherd. So we'll start right there next week with that, and I'll see you.